Monday morning. Hey, everybody, who's ready to innovate? Yeah. Woo! This is so impressive, and it's so gratifying to me because it shows just how excited and engaged the entire company is around really trying to take our commitment to innovation to new levels. We have, by far, the largest group of team members across the AMN organization gathered today, right here, all in every office and on the phones, hundreds of AMN team members. So I think, Suneel, we need to have you come more often because you really get this team fired up. And as I said, I think it's a really great sign because it shows not only the organization, but each individual and team's commitment to really thinking about innovation in a new way and really helping evolve the culture of AMN to make sure that innovation becomes part of our living and breathing in the way that we go about our business every day. Innovation is all around us. You know, if you think about how you came to work today, how many people drove to work today? Right? Or we're in a car, right? So if you happen to drive a car 10 years ago, are there some things about your car today that are different, or maybe 20 years? I know when I started driving a few years ago, we didn't have all these bells and whistles on our cars. I don't even think I know how to use all of them in my new vehicle. So innovation occurs everywhere within our world. Sometimes there are big technologies like the slick and sleek, sexy Apple Watch, which I still don't know how to use fully. You know, who would have thought that when shoelaces were invented, someday you'd be printing values and words on them? And you think this hair color is real? Thank God, right? So innovation occurs for so many different reasons: to make our lives easier, to drive efficiency, to really help evolve the world around us and the environment, to deliver new and different kinds of values. Sometimes it's as simple as connecting the dots that already exist in a different way. And I think how true that is for AMN and all of the departments and divisions that we have around the organization. And I think on most days we do an excellent job of connecting those dots efficiently. I don't think we would be number one in our industry and be perceived as that leader in quality and service if we didn't connect them. But there are different ways we can think about connecting those dots going forward, whether it be between sales and housing and accounting, or between locums and nursing and MSP and VMS and RPO. We have a lot of dots that could be connected in new and more innovative ways. 3 years ago, we added a sixth value to the AMN organization. That value is innovation. And we believed that our clients, in fact, our clients told us that AMN is a very innovative company. And we rely on you and need you, AMN, to continue to up your game when it comes to innovation. You think about many things we've done over the years. We dared to imagine that AMN could be the innovator in workforce solutions, and it didn't just happen by chance. We made investments in our people and our technology through acquisition to help position AMN for where we are as the leader in workforce solutions today. But you know what? I'm sorry, that's not going to be good enough 2, 5, 10 years from now. And so it's critical that we continue to look for ways to drive innovation both internally and externally as we work with our clients. And that innovation, those ideas are going to come from you and your colleagues all across the organization. I sincerely believe that the best ideas and ways to connect the dots in a different way are going to come from team members that are closest to the client, the clinician, the process, and finding ways to improve that along the way. And so a lot of what this week is about is to really get our team members and colleagues thinking about how we drive innovation on a daily basis. It can be very small things, and it could be some really transformational big things. And we are here to help you take those ideas and turn them into reality. Throughout the week, we're going to have a variety of events, starting with the big kickoff event here with Suneel, but also we're going to have panelists that will come in and talk about different innovative ideas that have been implemented across AMN, and then some brainstorming sessions where we'll capture ideas on how we can solve some of the problems and issues or opportunities that we've all recognized already exist within the company. I mentioned just a couple minutes ago that innovation can be about connecting the dots, and one of the greatest innovators that I think most of us know, Steve Jobs, talked about this in his famous speech, commencement speech to Stanford, about how, and I'm not going to get this exactly right because I don't have it memorized, but essentially what he's saying is it's actually pretty easy to look back and connect the dots. And you think about AMN and, you know, whether we started as a travel nursing company, then we evolved into Allied, and then we evolved into locums, and then we started this pathway and journey to becoming the leader in workforce solutions. So we introduced MSP, we introduced the RPO, we acquired a VMS company and Avantis. So as you sit here today, you're probably going like, yeah, duh, Susan, that's pretty obvious. That makes a lot of sense, but I can tell you, we did not have all of those dots connected just 15 years ago. We saw a vision by listening to our clients and understanding what they needed, and we believed that we could create our own pathway and we could innovate within an industry where there really hadn't been much innovation that had previously happened. And thank goodness we did listen to our clients and dared to imagine where we can go. But it really is more looking back historically. Just the nature of innovation means that you're going to need to take chances. And I think that's something that AMN needs to continue to focus on and get better at. We have to be able to think about connecting the dots internally and externally in different ways. And you know what? We're not going to be perfect at it. We're going to need to take risks that could cause us to have some little failures along the way. Nothing big, don't worry. I'm not talking about a catastrophic failure here, but every step of the way, we need to be pushing ourselves to take a risk in a way that we know we will probably not be perfect, at least the first time around. But as soon as we see how things are going, we get feedback, and then we innovate again. And then we get feedback, and then we innovate again. I'm pretty sure the first version of the Apple Watch was not without a few glitches. And in fact, there still are a few, but they keep persevering, and we need to do the same in whatever it is that we're trying to innovate around. I'm so proud of this organization and what has been accomplished, but what gives me even more confidence is the fact that I know that we have extremely talented, committed, and innovative team members all across the company that will help us connect those dots and help us to use best practices to bring into the AMN organization. Can't do it ourselves all the time. We need to look externally, right? And that's, you know, part of the purpose of bringing Suneel in today, which I'll introduce in a moment. We need to make sure that we are looking and listening to others and absorbing everything internally, externally, personally, professionally, and all of that ends up really forming who we are as people, but also as an organization. I have the approved bio introduction for Suneel, which I will read parts of. But actually, the more interesting thing is we had an opportunity to chat right before this. And you know, what I loved was when you were coming, Suneel, I mean, you don't know, you are such a celebrity. Everyone was so excited. It's like, ooh, is he here? Is he here? It's like, is Elvis in the house? And so, you know, so they said he's here, and I said, well, what about this bio? It's like, it's pretty long, it's sort of like, you know, pretty basic. And they said, don't worry, he may be a celebrity, but he's actually very normal. And so, and I found that out by chatting with them. And one of the things that I really enjoyed is when I asked him about meaningful influences on his life, he talked about one that's, as you know me, very near and dear to my heart, his mom. And he talked about his mom, who he's very proud was the first female engineer at Ford and was a huge influence, I'm sure, to her colleagues, to the Ford organization, but clearly a very big influence and inspiration to her two sons. And so he talked about how she would always push them to think about what they could do, who they could be, and just how they went about their daily lives in a different way. Not trying to do just what everybody else did a little bit better, but really think different about where you can go and what you can do. And you know, I can't imagine a mother being any more proud than she probably is of Suneel and his brother as well. And so I will read you some of the accolades before he joins us. So Suneel has been named the new face of innovation. It's a very young face, for sure. So you got a long way to go, Suneel, by the New York Stock Exchange, and he was featured by the New York Times as a disruptor, something that we need to do more of at AMN. He's globally known for building innovative mass appeal products from scratch. He humbly claims that he just likes to build things and create billions of dollars worth of value. That was my add-on. As the pioneering head of product development for Groupon, he transformed the company from an early stage startup to a multi-billion-dollar public company. During this period, Forbes magazine named Groupon the fastest growing company ever. Before Groupon, Suneel led product development for Firefox's innovative arm, Mozilla, where he built Personas, a browser product, which is still used by people around the globe today. Had a little stint, I guess, at the White House as a speechwriter for President Clinton's West Wing, and then was asked to co-author the national platform for the Democratic Party. I proceeded to have a heavy presence in the media world, and he produced an interactive film project with his brother, another name I'm sure you're familiar with, Dr. Sanjay Gupta with CNN, which focused on first-generation Indian Americans. Such an inspiration for so many reasons to so many people. Currently, Suneel is the founder and CEO of Rise, which is funded by the Google Venture Fund. And he has many academic accolades, including a JD from Northwestern University, MBA, got a bachelor's with distinction. You get the picture here. He currently lives in San Francisco Bay Area, and we are extremely, extremely honored to have him here with us today. I know, like me, you're going to be hanging on every word he has to share with us. So please join me in welcoming Suneel Gupta.
Thank you. I've never blushed so much from an introduction. Not a celebrity, never been called that before, but my older brother was kind of a big deal. Him and I, actually the last time I was here in San Diego was with him, so this was a few years ago actually. So it's good to be back. But I'll tell you a story. We were getting off the plane to go see one of the Marines that he had operated on when he was in Iraq in 2003, and he had just joined CNN. And funny story. I mean, kind of serious story, but funny ending. So while they were there, he ended up. The Marine was shot in the head. They were in the 1st Infantry that crossed over from Kuwait into Iraq. Terrible sort of thing. The problem was that there was nobody in the infantry that could operate on a brain. And Sanjay was there as a journalist, not as a doctor. But he had to decide what to do, and he decided, look, even if this gets me fired because it crosses the line, I'm going to do this. So he hacks together this sort of neurosurgical kit using sort of the hardware that they use to set up these tents, the drills, to literally drill into this man's skull, pull out the shrapnel, and saved his life, which was amazing. And so a few years later, him and I were in San Diego to go see him and go see his family, and they had this amazing sort of moment where he walks in and the family is very, very happy, very emotional. I mean, the Marine is doing really well now, and so the mom comes up first and she gives him a hug, and she's crying, and then the dad comes up and he says, "You operated on my son." And Sanjay says, yeah, I did. And he goes, "And you're a reporter?" So it's really good to be here. I feel like right now it's tough to have a conversation about innovation without invoking Steve Jobs' name. I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to take you back to 1997, and for those of you who haven't seen this commercial, here's a little bit of background. So Steve Jobs has just come back as CEO of Apple, and he wants to create a commercial, but the commercial isn't just going to be about the products, it's going to be about the thinking. And the commercial isn't just going to be focused on his customers, it's going to be focused on the Apple team. He wants to get something out there. He himself puts a lot of thought into it. He writes the script for the commercial and produces what you're about to see now.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Funny story about that commercial. Steve Jobs actually wanted to narrate that himself. So he did a version. You can actually see it on YouTube. Look for the Steve Jobs narrative. And it was between him and Richard Dreyfuss, and Richard Dreyfuss won. But how would you like to be the person that had to deliver that news to Steve Jobs? A couple years after that commercial, I was lucky enough to get a little job. I was an intern at the White House, helping out with the speech writing team, and Y2K was right around the corner. I was trying to figure out what that meant and what we need to do about it. So I started calling people in Silicon Valley. Now I'm from Detroit, and I had never been to Silicon Valley. And I didn't know much. I knew how to program, but I didn't know much about what was happening in that area of the country. So it was exciting for me to get on the phone with people out there. And because you're calling from the White House, certain people will answer the phone. Steve Jobs was actually one of them. And so I actually got to have a first conversation with Steve Jobs back then. And one of the things that was interesting to me was is that the narrative, even though this commercial that he had just produced was so focused on these individuals, was so focused on these sort of innovators that were kind of doing it in basements and garages, a lot of his narrative had shifted to, hey, what can we do inside a big company? Because the reality is that in '97, when he rejoined, Apple had already become a big company. Not necessarily known anymore as being the most innovative, but definitely having potential. And so his job, and the way he saw it, was that, look, we still have these assets inside the company. We still have people with ideas, but they're so heads down doing what they're doing right now, and we have to figure out a way to bring them out of their shells. We have to find a way to do this, getting groups of people going back to the garage, even if it's inside a big company. And that's exactly what he did. And over the next 10 years, you saw some of the big advances that we've seen, including the iPhone, the iPod, the watch, and many others. And so, you know, what I've been really interested in thinking about is, you know, kind of as an insider, or somebody who's now spent the past, 5 to 10 years working in Silicon Valley, but before that, just being somebody from Detroit. I went to law school, and law school is where innovative ideas go to die. So for me, I was trying to figure out, how can I be part of this world, but how can I also, observe it enough to sort of share that with other people. That's what I'm fascinated with. So, in a lot of ways, consider me, somebody who is in some ways the messenger. And sure, I've been part of a lot of this as well, but a lot of the learnings that I have come from observing people who I think are very, very good, people who have built, very, very big products. The people that I'm working with today are folks from Uber and from Airbnb and from Google. They're very early, and just learning as much as I possibly can from them so that I can apply it now to my own business and to my own teams, but also so that I can share a little bit of what I learned. And the easiest way for me to do that is to really sort of share with you 5 questions. 5 questions that I think people both inside and outside of big companies, people who are working on their own startups, but people who have also been able to build amazingly big, huge, massive successes within companies at Apple, at the like button at Facebook, Gmail at Google, products like Amazon Web Services, Java, Sony PlayStation. These are all efforts that weren't necessarily sanctioned by the company. The company never said, hey, go do that. Instead, it was people like you who had an idea, had an inkling, and has found a way to take that idea and make it happen. And that's not always easy. We all know that. But what are the things that you see in common from people who have done that successfully? Again, it's startups of their own or inside big companies. It boils down to 5 questions for me, and here's the first one. What does it look like? Seems like maybe an obvious question, but what I find from a lot of the best innovators is that they will start with this question, meaning if I ultimately am creating a user experience, if I'm creating something that's going to make our business better, who are the people that are going to be interacting with this product, and how are they going to be interacting with this product? What is that ultimately going to look like? So, who can tell me what this is? Got some Facebook, got some Google. Anybody else? You shout it out. LinkedIn. Anybody else? It's the one that's remaining. There it is. Twitter. So this is a drawing. Jack Dorsey, who was one of the creators of Twitter, literally, I mean, he has told me the story now about how he created this. He's sitting on a park bench, and I was outside his office at his now company Square, and for those of you who might have been following, he's now going to become the CEO of both Square and Twitter. And when he was thinking about the idea for Twitter, he's literally drawing it out. And one of the things he did with this drawing is he actually took it around. Imagine taking a notebook around and actually showing it to friends and saying, hey, what would you do with this? What would you tap on? Like, show me where your finger would go. Pretty interesting, fascinating, right? Because you can actually draw something, as he did, and then take it around and then start modifying that just on paper. So literally, after this drawing was shared, he drew another version, and then another one and another one. Here's Jack Dorsey talking a little bit about that experience.
So what would that look like? And I thought about this a lot, and I was, there are many, many sleepless nights. I think everyone in this room has felt the verge of an idea and how it just gets you a little bit excited and crazy and you can't sleep and you're on a whiteboard or you're drawing like crazy. But that is one of the most important things to start doing, is to start drawing your idea, to start getting it out of your head.
Getting it out of your head, getting it down on paper, essential. And again, I realize that I'm not sharing anything monumental with you here, but what I do encourage you to think about is to say, hey, when you do get it out of your head, sometimes people will approach it from the point of view of writing up a business plan. And that just seems like a big, big task, and they'll put it off. But when you start to actually draw, when you actually start to think about how you want people to interact with your product or with your idea, you can start to be more creative. It starts to become more fun, and it's also more shareable more immediately. So here's a product at Groupon that I was exploring called Rewards. The idea behind it was when I joined the company, it was relatively small, but we had lots and lots of competition coming in, and we're trying to figure out what can we do to have people be loyal to Groupon instead of using sort of all the competitors' products and potentially losing sort of market share to these competitors. One of the ideas that I came up with was a loyalty system called Rewards. And the idea was that every time you bought a Groupon, you earned a currency that we called G's. You earn enough G's, you get a free Groupon. Pretty simple, but we had already, by the point in time that I came up with this idea, we had already become a relatively large company. And so one of my challenges was, how do I get a lot of people very, very quickly to look at this idea? And so one of the things that I did at that time, which actually worked really, really well, was I created a video. I actually just designed this screen using some very, very basic prototyping tools. I didn't write a single line of code. These kinds of tools are available to you right now on the web, and they're very, very easy to use. But I just created a very simple version like this, and then took a video of myself down in the bottom right corner, sort of walking through this video. So I narrated myself actually showing people how this thing would work on my screen. And then I took basically this video and I sent it to our CEO, I sent it to a couple of members of our board. I sent it to any other of the decision makers in the business that I actually thought, look, might push back on something like this, might not agree with something like this, just so I can get their feedback in advance. But the reason that I'm bringing this up isn't necessarily because this was a groundbreaking idea. Actually, it wasn't. It failed. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because I wanted to figure out, how do I take just a little bit of my time, just a little bit. I know I have a job, and I know I have to be heads down doing what I do every day, but I have this idea and I really want to get it out there. How do I do it? And basically within like an hour and a half, I was able to create this video and share it with some folks and get people interested and excited, and the idea ended up becoming greenlit. When I look at sort of other stories, when I look at other companies who have had stories where ideas that, again, hadn't come from the top down, but people just had the idea, one of the things that I find is that they found a way to share that very, very quickly at scale. And so what you find is that they'll typically share it with a few people to get the initial feedback, but then there's some mechanism that they used to be able to get it out there, whether it be an innovation week, right? Or whether it be creating a video and sending it out to people, but something that's going to be vivid enough that people are actually going to be able to see what it looks like, and then some kind of forum where they can actually get it out there. And so be looking out for that. Be looking out for the ways that you can take just a little bit of your time, but actually share the ideas you have with a large enough forum. My gut tells me, based on the conversations I've had and based on the fact that you're even having an innovation week, which very, very few companies have, those forums exist, you just need to look out for them. And I think this week's a great opportunity. So here's a prototyping tool that is called Paper on Prototype, for those of you who may want to do this on mobile. It's so simple. I love this product because literally what you do is you just draw the mobile screens that you want to have. You take pictures of each mobile screen and you can actually create an app. So this is a way to take sort of Don Draper-like napkins and create an app out of it. It's pretty amazing. Paper on Prototype. So let's move on to the second question then, which is why not now? So this is actually one of my favorite questions because it's the trick, I think, of bigger companies. AMN in particular is a world-class company. It has a world-class reputation, and you build great products. And so I think the fear that I see often when I'm speaking to big companies is that if we've set the bar high, how am I, as somebody who has a product that hasn't been tested, able to get to that bar, right? And if it's not that good, then why is it worth sharing in the first place? Right? That's the struggle, I think, often of big companies. And it takes the guts of somebody to say, look, it's okay if I put this idea out there and it doesn't work, or if I put this idea out there and it doesn't have the polish or the sheen of the products that already exist within the company. And again, I do believe, just by the fact that you guys are having an innovation week, that there is the room and the space to say, look, there's some space here to ship an idea before it's actually perfect, and actually be able to grow that over time. So if you think back to like your favorite television shows, right? Think back to shows that you love that lasted a long time, and then go back and watch season 1 of that show, and you'll realize how bad that show actually is. You know, typically when I poll audiences, I ask them for hit shows, and Seinfeld ends up being sort of one of the top people yell Seinfeld often. So here is a clip from the pilot of Seinfeld.
If you know what happened in the Met game, don't say anything. I taped it. Hello. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You have the wrong number. Yeah, no. Yeah.
You up?
Yeah. Yeah.
People do move.
Have you ever seen the big trucks out on the street? Yeah, no problem.
Boy, the Mets blew it tonight, huh?
What are you doing, Chester? It's a tape. I taped the game. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I avoided human contact all night to watch this.
Hey, I'm sorry. I thought you knew. You got any meat?
I mean, it's pretty good, but you know, it's. I mean, I don't know if you noticed. Kramer's name is Kessler in the pilot. You know, it's just a very different. There was a lot that needed to be learned about what was actually working for people, and thankfully for them, NBC gave them the room to actually grow this show. But if you look at the ratings from this pilot, it should have been cut. It performed abysmally poor. In fact, even sort of core audiences that they thought were going to love it hated it. But they developed the show over time and, of course, became sort of the sensation that it became, but they wouldn't have gotten there unless they actually delivered a first product. It reminds me a little bit of my mentor, Reid Hoffman, who I am thankful to for bringing me out of grad school, saving me from becoming a corporate lawyer and bringing me to Silicon Valley. What he says to us is, look, if you got to be embarrassed by your first product, which I realize seems kind of scary, right? Because no one wants to share anything that they're not embarrassed by. But you've got to be a little bit embarrassed by it, because if you're not, then you've waited too long. You need to have sort of the ability to take feedback and actually even caveat and say, look, I am a little bit embarrassed by this, because we are, right? We will be, especially if we're moving fast and we're thinking outside the box. We are going to be embarrassed by what we create. But being okay with that is one of the central tenets of being a good innovator. So if you look at all the companies that shipped first products, these are companies that we admire. I mean, look at what they look like. I mean, look at Twitter up on the top left. Look at Facebook on the right. Right? Look at Google, which prides itself on being a very clean interface. What the hell is that? Snapchat was called Peekaboo. These are embarrassing showings. But again, top quality teams that weren't afraid to sort of put themselves out there. And that is what it takes. So around the time that I had met Reid, the reason I did is because I was creating a film project with Sanjay called the Kahani Project. And basically it was about using sort of the YouTube generation to make documentary films. So could people actually post footage to a central repository, and we could then edit it together instead of sending one crew out to a distributed sort of set of locations to gather the footage. So we tried this as an experiment, and it was really terrible. And I actually look back on this website and I shudder a little bit. I can't believe that I'm actually sharing this with you. I literally have yellow font on the screen. But I shared this with Reid, who had just founded LinkedIn, and LinkedIn had hit its stride by that point in time, and it was embarrassing. And I was expecting him to give me really critical feedback of the product, which he did, but he also said that you should submit this to South by Southwest. Just do it, because it's a good project, you'll put it out there, you'll get lots of feedback. And so I did. I submitted it to South by Southwest, and miraculously, it was picked up as a project. And throughout that process, we got tons and tons of feedback from really good people who were using the product, from people. It's amazing what happens when you actually put something out there, too. People come to your rescue. People have your back. They start to offer you advice. Most of it is valuable, and you can incorporate, right? And so eventually, we developed a product that we were actually somewhat, at least not embarrassed by, somewhat proud of, called the Kahani movement. Let's take a look at a concrete example, Airbnb, one of the darlings of Silicon Valley. Look at all these graphs. They're beautiful, right? Up and to the right, every single one of them, right? Exactly what investors want to see, exactly what innovators want to see. But let's double click on one of these. Let's double click on guess, that graph right there. What you'll see is a story like this, right? So you see this longer paced growth curve, but then let's zoom in just a little bit to this. For those of you that might not be able to see this, that's August 2008 through August 2010, 2 years, where this company barely had any traction, barely. That's 2 years, actually close to a year, where they had zero traction. They were trying ideas, it was failing. They were trying more ideas, they were failing. They kept trying over and over again, and for 2 years, they hadn't really hit their stride. Eventually they did, and it became a big, big company. What's the point? The point is, look, if you look back at most of the Airbnb products back in the early days, I guarantee you that team was incredibly embarrassed by them. But they put them out there, they get the feedback, they build something better. That's how innovation works. Here's the third question. Once we actually have the product out there, how is it that we can learn? Now, one of the central principles that I really believe in is about innovation is that building products is not a to-do list. It is a to-learn list. There are many things out there that you want to learn. When you have an idea, you consider it a hypothesis. I believe this will work. Then here are the unknowns between where I am right now and where it needs to be. And typically what we end up starting out with is a very beautiful vision in our head. Something like, imagine the idea that's in your head right now. Like imagine it in its full form and perfection, the thing that you want to build. It's great to be able to sort of think about that and admire the beauty of the ideas we have. We have to do that, right? And when we think about them, they look beautiful. And what we end up doing is we take those ideas and we start to really think about the components of each idea. So for those of you that aren't familiar with sort of sprint-based product development, at Rise, one of the things we do, this is a picture of one of our walls, we actually took ideas, we've broken them down, and we've separated them out sort of sprint by sprint. Each sprint lasts 2 weeks. So, on sheet 1, that's all the ideas that we actually want to build in that sprint, sheet 2, etc. And so what ends up happening is that you end up sort of creating this vision of, for this Mona Lisa type of product, what are all the things that need to be done? But oftentimes, here's where I find that people make a mistake. The belief is that in order to get the product off the ground, they need to build all of this. Right? They need to build all of it quickly. And what ends up happening is they get their Mona Lisa, but Mona Lisa looks a little bit something like this, which is one of the pitfalls, I think, of fast-paced product development, innovation, getting ideas off the ground, is that you have this image in your head and you feel like all of it needs to be built. No, not all of it needs to be built. Just part of it needs to be built. The key here is not to cut quality of your product. The key is to cut scope. What's the essential element here? What's the thing that will help us get the feedback that we need to get from the marketplace? Right? Can we just take one component of the idea, get it built quickly, but build it solidly, make sure it's clear and it actually has purpose and people understand what it is. It's a solid product, but it's not the full thing. We're going to learn into everything else. And the belief here, and the reason this is important, is because, look, you've got the Mona Lisa in your head. You've got this perfection in your head. But the reality is that there's a lot of unknowns. And you don't know, oftentimes, whether everything you believe is the way that the market is going to react. So the smaller you can start, if you can start with a component, the more you can learn. Uber's a great example of this. So, spent a good amount of time with some of the early members of the team. One of the advisors of my company, Rise, was the first CEO of Uber, and you literally had a business plan that went to investors saying, look, we don't just want to do transportation. We want to do delivery. We want to do self-driving cars. There are a lot of things that are in our roadmap right now. And so their vision, the Mona Lisa, was grand and it was beautiful. But what Uber did was smart. And they said, look, we're not going to start there. We're going to start just with town cars. We're just going to pick one component and we're going to get that right. And then if we get that one component right, we're going to get the feedback from the market about how people use mobile apps. We're going to get feedback from the market about how to set up a marketplace. And those learnings are going to be things that we can apply to make this a big, big business. Which really sort of gets to another point, which is about how to actually move quickly. So, with Uber, if you look at the first version of the app, they got it out there incredibly quickly. And you'll be able to go out there on Google and look at early versions of the Uber app. And again, you'll probably find something that the early team was embarrassed by. One of the things that companies like Facebook do in order to really spur sort of embarrassing but quick products is hackathons. And for those of you who've never been part of a hackathon, I guarantee you it's not the only kind of thing that engineers need to be a part of. It's something that anybody can be a part of, because it really takes advantage of what I think is one of the most important parts of product development, Parkinson's law. Does anybody know what Parkinson's law is? Anybody? Parkinson's law says that an idea will swell in complexity with the amount of time that you give it. So the more time you give an idea, the more complex it will seem. The less time you give it, the easier it will seem. That's the basis for hackathons, because you literally only have, X hours to actually build and ship a new idea. And how amazing is that? And so you literally have these developers from Facebook that will get together, or marketers that will get together, and they'll say, we have 24 hours to get a new idea off the ground. And by off the ground, I mean it's something that we can share with people outside of Facebook. And that's it. We're just going to give ourselves 24 hours. That takes advantage of Parkinson's law because, again, you take the essence of the ideas. You can take that part of the Mona Lisa and you can build just that. And then you can admit that you don't know everything right now, but because you're going to ship something and ship it quickly and realize it's going to be somewhat embarrassing, you now have an opportunity to learn. So the question then becomes, what do you do with your learnings? How do you use what we learn? So let's talk a little bit about Blockbuster. It's everybody's favorite example. Say that again? Was somebody?
I think I was their last customer.
Oh, last customer?
Like,
all right, good. At least I'm not like talking to the former CEO or something like that. I love Blockbuster too. What was amazing about Blockbuster, the reason from a product developer's point of view, I'm so mad at Blockbuster because they had so much data. They had so much good stuff. They really understood their customers very, very well. If you look at Blockbuster's architecture, their data systems, they were set up perfectly, right? They really understood purchase behavior. They really understood preference behavior, and they understood that at a really granular level, at a zip code level, which is incredibly valuable data, especially back then. The problem was this. If you look at the way that Blockbuster was really organizing product development, they began with their concept, and then they would roll it out to their stores to create an experience. And with that experience, they would create scale, and especially because they had quite a few stores, they were able to get scale pretty quickly, and with that scale came very interesting data. The problem is that circle really stopped there. So if you worked at Blockbuster at the time, talking to former employees, there were lots of PowerPoint presentations. There were lots of sort of get-togethers, people in boardrooms talking about, what they could do or what was interesting about the data. But there was very, very, very little action. And in particular, they were never able to really close the circle between data back to the concept itself, right? So really using that data. Then along comes Netflix. And Netflix says, look, we don't have a great product. We're going to admit that from the get-go. In fact, we were embarrassed slightly about the product. I don't know if any of you knew this, but Reed Hastings actually tried to sell Netflix to Blockbuster back in the early days for as little as like $50 million. So this is a team that really wasn't sure, I think, about how powerful their product actually was. But one thing that they did incredibly well is that they were always paying attention to this loop. Right? So even though they didn't have the scale of a Blockbuster, even though they didn't have the quantity of data of Blockbuster, anything that they could get, they were using it, and they were making that experience better and better and better. And once they were able to develop this circle and really connect all of these dots, they were able to make this spin to a point of defensibility, and down came Blockbuster. And you see many, many examples of this in the market. This is just my favorite because I like to make fun of Blockbuster. But what was the problem there? Like, what do we, if we really sort of take a step back and we think about, all right, if you were inside Blockbuster at the time, is the problem that they just loved PowerPoint presentations? No, I don't think so. I think the problem was more what some people refer to as local maximum. How many people in the crowd know local maximum? Heard of the concept? Okay, so with local maximum, you see this small mountain here, and oftentimes what will happen is that we'll be climbing a small mountain, right? And because we have a product and it's working relatively well, just as Blockbuster's product was working relatively well, and we'll want to climb that small mountain. The problem is that when we get to the top of that small mountain, we look up and we realize there's a much bigger mountain to climb. This happens all the time. This happens all the time. I mean, if you look at sort of the commonality between what I'm saying right now and all the books out there that, are okay, but like, you look at like Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, oftentimes what they are talking about is this idea of sort of getting off the small mountain and getting onto the big mountain. Now, with Clayton Christensen in Innovator's Dilemma, they sort of put that on the business and the context to say, hey, you've got to get people in their own surroundings. You got to go sort of do things as a business. I actually think that the data has proven that it's much more about you. It's much more about the employees. It's much more about the mindset. The fact of the matter is that every single person in this room has an idea in their head. You do. Even if it's not at the top of your mind right now, you do. You've thought of something that could be incredibly powerful. You look at the scale you have here at AMN Healthcare, you have hundreds of thousands of clinicians that could impact millions and millions of lives. If you're able to move the needle just a little bit, if you're able to get yourself to a bigger mountain, the impact that this organization can have, that you can have, is absolutely astounding. But it takes a new way of thinking. So if there are ways, there are places to have ideas that will modify and tweak and make things a little bit better, there will always be value for that. But the question is, for the big ideas you have in your head right now, the things that you think could drastically change the game and get business into a bigger mountain, to get you to a bigger mountain, those are the ideas I encourage you to really spend time on, because not enough people do. So at Rise, I'll give you, sort of a self-indulgent walkthrough of the product that we're building. My team and I are building in San Francisco right now, which is focused on a similar area. We are trying to solve the problem on the top right, which is how do you take a health worker? In our case right now, we're focused just on registered dietitians, but we are expanding it to sort of more and more health workers, and create a mobile platform where you can make a health worker scale their time by 10x with less time and better outcomes. Right? That's the audacious goal that we have. And the way that we've approached that is through what we call our micro-coaching platform. I'll give you just a very, very quick glimpse of this. But the idea is that by giving these practitioners, these experts, a mobile app where throughout their day they can engage with their clients, they can do so, their patients, they can engage at their kid's soccer game, in line at the grocery store, in between meetings, we're going to be able to drastically improve the efficiency and the use of their time. So what you'll see here is a coach, what we call our coaches, which is a practitioner who is engaging with her client, checking out sort of her data, looking at her Apple Health Kit data, the number of steps she's taken, the kinds of food that she's been logging, and then in a very, very quick way, she's able to sort of give feedback to her patient. So in this case, we're working on protein together, so she's complimenting her and giving her a rating for following sort of that goal. She scrolls down a little bit more, finds a really great meal, gives her, again, a green rating instead of a yellow or a red, which would be less than perfect, for following sort of the exact type of lunch that they're working on together. So when we think about patient engagement, we think about something like this, which is a very seamless fit into an expert's life, because our goal isn't actually to replace the expert. Our goal is to actually make an expert scale wildly. The second way that we do that is through what we call personality without presence. So we were able to integrate with recipe databases around the country that have been available in order to give our experts the ability to sort of imagine tap recipes to be able to say to you, hey, when lunch comes around as my patient, here are the kinds of recipes I think you should eat. Or here are the kinds of recipes, types of food I think you should eat. And to do so without actually bottlenecking on my time. So what I'm doing is I'm spending a little bit of time up front now, but now I'm effectively curating a mobile app experience for you that's going to continue to live with you. And then finally, having automated insights and predictions. So one of the insights that we came to at Rise when we were interviewing hospitals, insurance companies, practitioners, is that there was an inordinate amount of time being spent summarizing data. So figuring out, you as my patient, how have you been behaving, trying to roll that up, summarize that, and give that back to you. Because our system is 100% asynchronous, meaning you're tapping into the system, you as a client, we're storing all the data that you have that you're sharing with us. We're storing all the data that your coach or your practitioner has as well. We're now able to sort of automate those insights. And by doing that, we can now start to alert your practitioner when you need help the most. So say, for example, we know Tuesday is a really bad day for you. We know you eat terribly. We know that you don't get a lot of activity. On Monday evening, we may alert your practitioner to say, hey, you know what? Patty's going to have a terrible day on Tuesday, so she typically does, and she needs the help. So you're going to want to stay on her. And so to be able to take a practitioner's time and to direct that in the right way is something that we are really investing time in. And then finally, sort of figuring out how to pair sort of human beings with artificial intelligence. So if you're in Silicon Valley, everybody geeks out over AI. And that's how they believe the world is going to be better, is through sort of AI. But you find a lot of teams out there that want to replace the human being with artificial intelligence. Our approach is a little bit different. We actually respect the empathy and the expertise that comes from a real human being. So what we want to do is we want to pair and partner human beings with the efficiency of artificial intelligence to create a network that we think is much, much better. So a little bit on Rise, and the reason that I bring that up is because all this has just been through painful learning. Right? We didn't have any of these insights to begin with. We thought about this from the very beginning. We thought about things like Healthy Out, where with Healthy Out, what you can do now, which is part of the Rise platform, it will tell you, based on your location, what food in your local area now you can actually eat based on your specific dietary restrictions and preferences. So say you're gluten sensitive, say you're training for a marathon and focusing on grilled food, it will tell you with the tap of a button all the restaurants in your area that actually have menu items that match your specific diet. When you tap into a restaurant, it will tell you exactly what menu items actually fit your diet. So pairing sort of capabilities like this with experts is something that we've learned ourselves into. It's been 18 months of doing that. We've moved very, very quickly. But I can tell you that this product is actually something that we didn't think about 18 months ago. It looks very, very different. When we started small with the pass screen and sort of learned our way into this. So I'm going to skip the demo here. Oops. Okay. This is a fun story. Does anybody know the coolest cooler? We got one person. We got some more. Okay, good. All right, so I love this story because this is a small team, I believe based in Colorado, that was trying to run a Kickstarter campaign for a brand new type of cooler. And so they ran this campaign on Kickstarter, and what they found was they were trying to raise about $100,000, and they came short. They were able to raise about $80,000. And so what the team did was very clever. They actually went to all the people who did contribute to the campaign, and they said, well, what did you see that you really liked? And what did you not see that maybe you would have liked? And they iterated on the product, and they made it much better, and then they released another campaign. And here it is, which shows you really quickly.
The Coolest is a complete redesign of what a cooler can be. First, you've got this 18-volt rechargeable blender. You don't realize the number of places you can really go for a blended cocktail or smoothie until you've got a blender built right into the lid. You're already carrying around a cooler full of ice and tasty beverages. Why not blend them up and become a summertime hero anytime, anywhere? And what's a party without music? The Coolest comes with a removable Bluetooth speaker that connects to any smartphone to wirelessly stream music from up to 30 feet away. It's amazing where speaker technology has come in the last few years. You can skip songs and adjust the volume right from your phone, and this little box can really put out some sound. And since you've got that 18-volt battery for the blender, why not get the most out of it? Maybe your camera battery is low, or maybe you have an iPhone and want to use it after 2 in the afternoon. Recharge with you wherever you are with this waterproof USB charger. The party doesn't stop just because the sun goes down, and you shouldn't have to freeze your fingers searching endlessly for your favorite drink. The Coolest has waterproof LED lights embedded in the lid so you can easily find what you're looking for with the push of a button.
So, I'm going to pause it right there. So they couldn't raise $100,000 for this on Kickstarter, but again, through taking sort of the feedback that they were able to get and sort of putting that back into the concept, he then released sort of a modified version of the product. Any idea how many people here think he raised the $100,000 during the second campaign? Keep your hands up. How many people think he raised more than that? Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. How many people think he raised $250,000? Keep your hands up. How many people think he raised $500,000? How many people think he raised $1 million? Keep your hands up. $1 million. Okay, we're down to about 10% of the audience. How many people think he raised $2 million? Somebody's hand just went up. Okay. Keep your hands straight up, though, if you think he raised $2 million. Okay. Here he's $13.2 million. $13.2 million. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Look, this is an odd example, right? Freak occurrence. But if you talk to the people at Kickstarter, this is actually one of the most important things, is that they often find that second-time campaigns for products that are actually very similar do far, far better. And the reason for that is because people were able to take the feedback that they were able to get during that first campaign that didn't work out so well and use that for the second campaign. So oftentimes, the campaigns that do incredibly well on Kickstarter are not the first ones, but the second ones, third ones, where they're actually able to get some feedback. So I'm gonna fly through this last question here, but I think it's an important one, so I'm gonna spend a minute on it, which is how do we stay hungry, right? And Suzanne was talking before about sort of the Steve Jobs commencement speech, and one of the things that he said during that speech is, we have to stay hungry, we have to stay foolish, right? Which ties into everything that we're talking about right now. I'm going to skip this story just to keep it going, but I can come back to it during Q&A if we want. This is a diagram that I actually want to spend a little time on, though, because you look at people in the industry that we really, really respect, people as innovators. And what we believe, or at least the common sort of story, is that they've just sort of been able to hit their stride from the very, very beginning, right? They built these products. The products did really, really well. People loved them, and everybody was rich. The reality is, if you look at their story, it's actually very different. For every single one of these guys and many, many others, there's failure all along the path. And sometimes that failure happened right away. You look at Bill Gates, you look at Elon Musk, their first ventures failed. You look at even somebody like Zuckerberg, who had 4 products before he got to Facebook. The 2 before Facebook actually failed. So the willingness, again, to sort of put these products out there and have them fail is an incredibly important thing. But what I'll say to you is that one of the things that stands out that I think is often sometimes ignored about what Jobs said was that this is about a group of people. Oftentimes, the innovation that we see within companies like AMN aren't coming from just individuals. They might be inspired by an individual, but it's ultimately a group that has come together to make this happen. All right, so how do you figure out who these groups are? Because it's no longer the individuals on the left side of the screen. You look at the products that are changing our lives today, it's about teams of people that have come together. One of my favorite movies, or one of my favorite stories, is Billy Beane, who was, you may have seen the movie with Brad Pitt about him as a baseball recruiter. But one of the insights that he had, one of the ways that he recruited that was different, they scouted that was different than other scouts, is he paid attention to the differential of a player. What do I mean by that? Well, he said, look, other scouts are just paying attention to how a player is on the field, their individual stats. When a player's on the field, what happens to everybody else on their team? Are they playing better? Are they playing worse? That was really interesting because no one else had really cut the data or looked at it that way. And then you have Mark Cuban, who bought the Dallas Mavericks, wanted to turn that into a world-class organization, said, I like that Billy Beane, I like the way he thinks. I'm going to use that for my team. And so he focused almost exclusively on recruiting players who had a high differential, meaning he wasn't paying as much attention to their individual stats. He wanted to know, how did the other 4 players perform when you're on the court? Were they performing better or were they performing worse? That's your differential. As innovators, it's not just about us coming up with the ideas. It's not. Some of the best innovators aren't the people who actually come up with the original idea. They're the ones that actually help the ideas happen. And so this week, as you get into your groups and you get into these brainstorm sessions, remember that it doesn't have to be your idea. It could be something that you love that somebody else is doing, and your job is to figure out what is the kind of energy that you want to bring to the situation. Thank you so much.
so pass it to the outer edge. We know we've already checked online. There aren't any questions online. Here comes one. I'll just say this one. Yeah. Is AMN partnering with Rise to use their app? Shall I move on to the next one?
I mean, we'd love to talk about that.
This next one actually is quite a good one. What do you think someone should do when they're met with a naysayer that aren't getting, and they're not getting any feedback?
Yeah, so that's tough, right? I mean, when I was pitching Rise, it was the first time that I'd actually pitched a brand new business. And before that, all of the products that I had been part of, I mean, I get a lot of credit. That bio, by the way, that she was reading is completely, I mean, I somehow, over the past year, have gotten an agent that helps me with this stuff and just completely Ari Emanuel's everything that I do. But I was lucky. I mean, I just got to be around really great people who could show me a few things. So when I was going out and actually creating my own business and getting out there and pitching it to investors, I was not prepared for the amount of negativity that was going to be thrown towards my ideas. So, just to give you a sense, my first visit to Sand Hill Road, where most of the investors in sort of the Silicon Valley area are, I pitched five investors on Rise, and 0 said yes. So I was 0 for 5, which is basically a deal killer for a business. But I have a very awesome and supportive wife, and she allowed me to just kind of bootstrap this, spend a little bit of our money, build the product out a little bit more, and just make it happen. And then go back out there to Silicon Valley and get 2 or 3 out of 5 to say yes, including Google Ventures, which is a great investor and has been amazing for Rise. Google's been a great partner. So I realized that whomever asked the question is probably talking about a different type of naysayer, but the reason I bring that up is because I think the energy that can create is about the same. Ultimately, you have an idea, and you are pitching it to somebody who you want to be excited about it, and you're not getting the feedback that you want to get. So what do you do in that situation? And I think there's no silver bullet for that answer, but I can offer you a couple of things. One is that you have to in these situations seek other people's feedback, but not necessarily always seek their approval. So what I mean by that is oftentimes, it is your own approval that you are looking for. If you have an idea and you believe in it, it's something that you respect and you admire and you think can be helpful and can help people. That's the approval that is ultimately most important, not necessarily everybody else's. Now, I know that sounds weird to say in an organization where ultimately approval will be needed, but you'd be surprised by how much you can get done without initial amounts of approval, to the point where you can actually take it and share it with people at a later stage where it's already been proven out a little bit, right? So just be very careful about not, distinguishing feedback from approval. The second thing I would say, though, is to listen. People, one thing that I've realized is that people don't always know how to articulate negative feedback. Right? That is a skill. To be able to constructively give people feedback is a skill, and it's actually a somewhat rare skill, which means that if you're going to judge your own idea by other people's skill, and a skill at that's somewhat rare, then you're never going to feel good about your own ideas. So just remember that there are going to be people who come off as naysayers, but they're coming off as naysayers because they have feedback that isn't necessarily positive. They just don't know how to express themselves always in a negative way. And just keep that in mind. That seems like a bad question to end on. Are we going to end there?
Sanjay, you are fabulous. This has been
Suneel.
wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.